theater was probably as much fun as you could even have as a teenager growing up. But my family pushed books and pushed education and science and learning because to them, they believed that's the way. We had other cousins, we had other family members that managed to move up what we call the social elevator thanks to education, and they were big believers. So they pushed that on all of us, on me and my brothers, and we're very grateful for them doing that. So I went to public school, same as Champagne, with the difference that in Morocco, public school is really, really bad. So it's not. So, but I was in a situation where, and again, this is something to share with you all, is you can make something good out of something bad. So you always have to focus on everything has an edge. So because I went to public school, my edge was the majority of kids were not interested in education, the teachers were bad, the resources were not good. But I could excel in the middle of all of this stuff and I would stand up. And I did that. So I worked a little bit hard, I stood out, which opened the doors to the scholarships. So I ended up going to the best business school in the country. I did that for 4 years, which only took about 100 kids every year. So because I did that and I excelled in it, immediately I finished and I got a job in one of the big fours, so Ernst & Young, which again was very selective. So they would take the best out of the average kids and average schools. So that job opened many more opportunities. So I worked for a few years in Ernst & Young between Casablanca and Paris. And unlike most of the kids in my generation and my age that always looked up to France and Belgium, because in Morocco we speak French, right, in addition to Arabic. So everybody who wants to study, who wants to have a career, and improve their life, they immediately go to these countries, at least the educated class. I mean, others go to other countries. I wasn't thinking that. I said, no, I'm gonna do something different. So I was looking at the US, because I grew up watching the movies and the opportunities that Ayman talked about earlier, and a good education, opening resources and opening more opportunities for everyone. So I was like, I'm gonna go and do my MBA in the US. And everybody would laugh when I would say that in my school among my friends. And they're like, do you know how much it costs? There's no way. My parents said, we can't pay it, obviously. So you manage. And I went and I got a Fulbright scholarship. We're discussing, we have that connection with Paula there. So with, again, making the most out of very limited resources, that scholarship gave me the education, gave me my MBA, which paid for A to Z. I didn't have to spend a single dollar. And again, because I was there, I was in Washington, D.C., World Bank was right there, IMF was right there. So I used every moment that I had to do internship, to get connections, to apply for opportunities, and then the first job opened up. It was a small analyst job that's built on other opportunities, and then the rest is history. We can talk about that afterwards.
Awesome, thank you. Tessa, can you list the first 5 greatest accomplishments of your life? Can you tell these kids, what do you consider, looking at yourself now, looking back, what are the things you're proud of now that you are no longer 20?
So one of and I'm going to bring it back to our children's science camp. So my parents grew up poor in the Philippines, and the land of opportunity was the U.S. At the time that they grew up, the U.S. actually controlled the United States, and in order to get the ticket to the United States, you had to be in medicine. So both of my parents, my dad became a doctor and my mom was a medical technologist. But what was interesting about their life is that the first generation, so I was the first one born in the United States, is that they had this work ethic and this belief that anything was possible because they got the golden ticket to the US. What I will tell you, what was super interesting is that because I grew up in a medical household, my goal was, because my parents said education is your ticket to where you want to be in life, is I actually wanted to be a neurosurgeon. So my goal from when I was 5 years old to probably I was 19 years old was to be a neurosurgeon. So my first real, I was most proud of is I was published in the Journal of Immunology at the age of 19 because I was doing lab work, shooting enzymes into rabbits and rats between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. For my entire freshman year of university. And it was a job that nobody wanted, but this man that I worked for, his name was Dr. Wayne Marasco. He ended up becoming the head of Harvard University's department for AIDS. And so in the 1980s, AIDS was a really, really big issue. So he went on to, so after I graduated college in 1988, he went on to Harvard. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because when I was a junior and I was supposed to take the MCATs, and you don't know what happens, that changes your trajectory. I dropped a curling iron on my eye, and I was in bed on my back in the emergency room a week before the MCATs.
The MCAT is the entry exam
yes.
into medical school.
Yeah, so you have to take this test to get into medical school. And back then, there weren't any options. You took the test May 15, and that will determine whether or not you would go to medical school when, in the fall. But because, for me, I had always been ahead. I had been published by the time I was in my second year at university, and so forth and so forth. But being in bed on my back for 4 weeks, this doctor, and I wish I could remember his name, he would ask me, well, why do you want to be a neurosurgeon? And I said, oh, okay, because it's the hardest thing you can be in medicine back then. And I had this wonderful professor who taught about memory, and I wanted to know how the brain works. So I really was really interested in that. But on the side, I also had a side business at the university, and I was a student entrepreneur. I started this company when I was a junior in college, and it was to create, the boxer shorts with college logos? Do you have that here in Italy? So mine was the very first company in the world to be in department stores. So the University of Michigan, where I went to school, is the largest alumni group in the world. And what happened was I met some kids who created shorts, and they were selling them. And I said, oh, you're doing it all wrong. Let me show you how to do this. And they said, oh, if you want to do this with us, let's create a business. And at the time I worked, I don't know if you're familiar with the store Saks Fifth Avenue. It's a very famous store in New York City, very high end, but I had been working as a stock girl since I was 12 years old and one of their teen models, and so I knew how retail stores worked. So this business that we had was we would take the college logo and put it on the boxer shorts. In 1986, you could only buy men's boxer shorts in white, blue, and stripes.
Mutande da uomo.
Right? Underwear, right? So what happened in 1987 that changed where you see boxer shorts with funny designs, everybody wears it outside of not just underwear, right? Madonna's Boy Toy Tour. So Madonna, do you know Madonna, the singer? She wore in her Boy Toy Tour boxer shorts over her leggings, and that on college campus in the late 80s, every girl in every sorority was wearing these shorts, blue, white, or stripes, including Madonna's Like a Virgin, and there's 2 videos where she's wearing boxer shorts over black leggings. And so I had the first business. And so my second accomplishment was when I was a senior, my 4th year. So then my junior year, I knew I couldn't go to medical school because I couldn't take this admissions test. I would have to wait another year. But then I was selected do you know Michael Dell and Dell Computers?
Dell Computers.
Yeah. So there's this association of collegiate entrepreneurs. I was picked over Michael Dell because at the time, Michael was only fixing computers in his dorm room at SMU, but I had this business with boxer shorts in all the department stores across the United States. So they picked me to represent the United States in 10 Downing Street in London.
Che è la casa dove sta il primo ministro. C'era un evento alla casa del primo ministro inglese e hanno invitato lei, rappresentante dei Young Entrepreneurs americani.
To represent the United States. And the headlines of the Financial Times and the London Times at the time was East and the West unite for entrepreneurship. And so my roommate was Maria from Russia. And Maria was this beautiful, if they had supermodels in the 80s, she would have been a supermodel. She was shocked when she found out that the American representative was a female. She goes, you're not supposed to be female. They picked me to come here because I'm supposed to get information from the male. And so we became these amazing friends, but in 1989 or 1988, at the time, you had all of these. So you had 33 countries. This was my first international meeting. I was flown from the United States to go to 10 Downing. I'm from Michigan. I had not really explored the world at that time. It was just, at that time I had only been to the Philippines. But when I came to 10 Downing and there were 33, and there were all of these ministers, I was the only female. All of them were all male. The entire meeting, I was the only female besides Maria, who was not even there to be a maid, she was there to seduce the American entrepreneur. And so what was what in that setting, and we all are still very good friends. It's a meeting like this amazing meeting, and what all of these ministers wanted to learn is how come a girl from Michigan, which is nobody even knew where Michigan was, how can you become such a powerful entrepreneur? And when you're 20 years old or 21 years old, you don't know what they're talking about. They just ask you, well, how do you do your business? How did you become successful? Why are you here in 10 Downing, and what government aid, how did government help you? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I had no interaction with government. I had no money from government. I said, I have something that everybody wants to buy. That's it. If you're an entrepreneur, it's all about creating something that people want. And so I'm going to go and lead into the United Nations Sustainable Development, because when there's a big problem or when there's a big desire, it becomes a big opportunity. So that single lesson in 10 Downing, and it's only in retrospect that I kind of learned the value of these international connections, because what happened was my French peer, who was then, he had started a computer company in France, he became very good friends with the ministers from Russia. Russia, 2 years later, privatized. Philippe Duluth and the two ministers became the biggest holders as they were spinning up companies in Russia. Philippe was able to pick up 3 or 4. And so you can imagine the opportunities that come when you're connected to the ministers who were then selling off their companies at dirt cheap. So that was an opportunity, right? And again, you have no idea where these opportunities will show up. But one thing that I didn't know, so at 22 years old and I'm graduating university, I said, oh, this is a great college business. And so we sold the business to, is the brand Joe Boxer in Italy? Do you know the brand Joe Boxer? But it's a very big brand in the United States. Two guys doing their MBA decide to buy our contracts from our manufacturing plants in North Carolina. They were attending Duke University. We sold the company thinking that it could not be more than just the university. They were the ones who then created the boxer shorts for the NBA, which is the national, for all the baseball teams, all the football teams, all the soccer teams, all the sports. So they had a vision, because sitting in as 20 years old, you had no idea of this big world. So we didn't anticipate that you could become that big. So I ended up, what happened is with this group of 33, and I had a peer in Mexico, France, Canada, we said, oh, we want to change the world. So at the time, there's a concert called Live Aid. Have you heard of Live Aid? So we wanted to do a concert for AIDS, because then I knew my Dr. Wayne Morasto. I said, can we do a concert, raise money? And I ended up in restructuring, because this big concert at the time was going to be on 4 different continents with my friends from the other entrepreneurs, and we were going to do a college on college campuses around the world to collaborate. But then what happened was, you couldn't do sponsorship at the time, and we had to downsize the idea. But what happened was that I ended up doing events in New York City for AIDS. And one of the things that I wanted to do, and this is an idea of when you don't know what's going to happen. I came out of the subway and I read this magazine, said the most powerful people in New York City. So I started calling this list, and what was interesting is, after 5 o'clock, because one of my part-time jobs in college was to be a temporary, so I was working as a secretary, is that after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., the staff leaves and goes home, but the big boss is always there and he answers their own phone. So I don't know if you've heard of the company American Express, Merrill Lynch. So I would call these people because my parents were in medicine. I didn't know what a CEO was. I didn't know Merrill Lynch, American Express, any of these companies. But I would call these people and say, would you like to have lunch with Frank Sinatra? And they go, wait, how do you know Frank Sinatra? And I would go to the story that I met Frank Sinatra because he's best friends with Dionne Warwick. Dionne Warwick, they have the same birthday, December 11th. And Dionne had asked Frank, Dionne Warwick had created That's What Friends Are For, and asked all of Elton John and these people to do a concert for AIDS. And so I was creating this thing in New York, and I called all of these people on this very, like, supposed to be powerful people, and I asked them, would you like, and he said, well, yes, I would love to meet Frank Sinatra. I go, okay, it's $25,000, just the next room for lunch. And then they would say, can I bring my other friends? And I would go, well, what friends? And they would go, Merrill Lynch. I go, is that a girl or a boy? Because I didn't know they were companies. And so they would go on, and they were completely fascinated by this young girl calling these powerful people, and then introducing them to their dream, star at the time. And that's how I ended up. So these very powerful men would say, okay, you just landed in New York City from Michigan, which is in the middle of the country. You're a nobody, and you have the most powerful men at this table with their childhood, idol, Frank Sinatra. Because what do you want to do in life, and we're going to help you. And so that's how I ended up in restructuring companies. And when I restructured companies, what happens is that, to tell my parents what I did, is I was a doctor to sick companies. And that meant that if you had poor stock performance, you get low market share, I go, Dad, I did the diagnostics. So then I would tell them, okay, this company is a little sick, it's not making as much money as it should. And then I would then tell them how to fix it. And so I did that for 20 years, but then what happens is I don't like to make people feel bad. So the people that I would whack or like fire or restructure is I would find them new jobs in other companies. And so what happened was I ended up being friends with all of these CEOs, and as they rose, they would always bring me, which is why I ended up in a spot where, the person next to you have no idea where they're going to be in 20 years. No idea. But if you're kind and you're helpful and you're always trying to help them succeed, it will take you to places you would never imagine. But that's basically my
You remember this meeting for a long time. Meeting these people is just extraordinary. Okay, so she combined two questions. She told us where she comes from, how she got there, and started on her accomplishments. Maybe you can say more of the list of things you think at this point you did. Chantal, if you want to...
I don't want to go after Tess.
She's a Yale fellow. You have to tell them about Yale because that's their tickets.
Yeah.
What do you consider, your greatest accomplishment in life? You can just have a list, so these kids understand what is your measure of success, of accomplishment. What makes you happy looking at your life and what you did?
Let's see. Well, first getting my PhD and postdoc, right? Because I wouldn't go back before 28 years old. I don't know if I would make it the second time. So perseverance, keep to school, do it. Second, I would say, let's see. I think, you have these SDGs there. So before, I'm a researcher by training, right? So I joined the UN as a researcher. And my boss then asked me to be the major group coordinators. And what does that mean? That means that I'm responsible at the UN for everybody that is not a government to contribute on sustainable development. That means business, youth, women's group, local authorities, science, technology, all those groups of people, NGOs, contributing to the UN. And so we organized Rio Plus 20. Tess, this is how I recruited Tess. The reason I wanted her on board was because we need to have the private sector to achieve the SDGs, and she was my key to the private sector. And so we managed to bring 10,000 people to Rio for the Earth Summit Plus 20, and that was important because that's where we did the mandate to negotiate these SDGs. And so after that, one of the accomplishments is basically to get on board the development and the environment community, as well as the human rights people and the humanitarian, because all of these four were working in silos. The humanitarian were working on one hand, the human rights people, the development people, and the environment people, and they didn't talk to each other. And when we started the negotiation, the co-chair from Hungary and Kenya said, I will meet with all these major groups, and hear them before we meet with the government at one condition. The condition was that they try to agree amongst themselves. Because we have 190 93 countries that need to agree. So if the civil society, those who can agree amongst themselves, how are we supposed to do it? They need to help us. And so we managed to do that. So I think that's one achievement. Before that, it was the negotiation of the Sustainable Consumption Production Framework, because that's extremely important if we are going to achieve this. It's actually now SDG 12. And it's one of the one that we have the most problem with, along with climate change, but they're interrelated. And so that was extremely hard to negotiate. The US was horrible at it. They kept pulling us back and backward, not wanting to interfere and hurt their private sector, no matter what the cost to society and to the environment would be. So that, I would say that's another one. And perhaps the other one is at UNCTAD, at the UN Conference on Trade and Development, what we do is to help developing countries. So there are only a handful, 10 countries that actually graduated. The last one is Korea. Korea is no longer considered, well, South Korea, a developing country. But basically, in all these years, in 75 years of development, we only have 10 countries that develop. So there's a serious problem with the development model that we have. It's not working, it's broken. There's a serious problem with the economic system that we have and with the financial system that we have. So what I'm proud of and one of my accomplishments is we created a group, a network of economists at the UN, working on the new economics for sustainable development. And on there, I focus on micro, small enterprises, which is why I work closely with Ayman, and also with economic empowerment of women, because if women own the asset, right now women own less than 10% of the wealth on the planet, and as long as that's true, we will have to fight for our right and go back like we did with abortion right in the US. So we need, as long as women have the wealth, we will not have to fight for our right because we will be at the table, decision-making table. And therefore, this is another, I would say, accomplishment, along with...
No, she's an Irish. Another thing that Chantaline does, she does Ironman races.
And ultramarathon.
An ultramarathon. Last year when she was here, she was training for a 500 kilometers bike ride. So she was here, biking all over, and then went to, it was in Canada? Where you had the 500. So she's also an incredible athlete.
Okay, you should tell them about the Yale Fellowship because they made so much.
Oh yeah, and by the way, this is a great opportunity. Now that I'm sorry, I forgot. So I'm a Yale World Fellow. So they choose like 18, 19 mid-career people that have a leadership potential to bring to Yale for a full semester. You have access to all of Yale resources. It's all paid. And now, based on the model of the Yale World Fellow, they just created one on climate change. So it's for people that are about, less than 30 years old. So if you want to apply, let me know. I can send you the email, and it's all paid, and it's wonderful program.
And all of many of the universities in the US have that program. So you also have it at Columbia World Fellows. You also have it at University of Michigan. So if you want to go to the US, there are all of these vehicles that you can come to the US to do it with and partner with that.
Yeah, so fellowships are basically sponsorship fully paid. The Yale University is one of the greatest, but Texas State, Columbia, and other universities have those. So if you think of complementing your education that most of you have done in Italy with an experience in the United States, there are opportunities. We both came from families of no means. My family could not even pay for my plane ticket from Italy to go to the United States, and dreaming of working at UN was completely far-fetched. It's through scholarships that we made it, okay? So scholarships are very important. If you think you cannot do important schools because you don't have the means, you just have the will and the persistence, you can go and learn wherever you want. Ayman, what do you think are your greatest accomplishments? I'm sorry, something I forgot about him. Ayman was instrumental in making June 27th the UN Day of Small and Medium Enterprises. That's correct? So we might be one of the companies that celebrate on June 27th.
So, grazie. So I'll be very honest with you. dico la verità, I was a horrible student. Ma ero proprio male, mi piaceva il libro un po', la merenda, il gelato. I was a very bad student. Really bad. So for all of you that are not good in class, it's okay. There's hope. I almost failed the PhD program.
Yeah, the girls during the boys don't have to do anything.
I was that close of failing the PhD program. Right? I was not good, like the stars.
The girls don't have a choice. We have
They can wing it. Sometimes men, they have more confidence, right?
The only thing that saved me, to be clear, the only thing that saved me is I always saw things differently. I would always question the system. Ma perché? Ah no, si fa così, ma perché si fa così? Perché si fa così, ma perché? I would always ask, why? Why is this? Why? Why do we do it this way? Why is it this way? Why do we have to write it this way? And I drove everybody crazy.
Still does.
Still does, right? Because as I told you, sono guida, osserva, sono americano, egiziano, il sistema è diverso. Vedo tre cose per diversi modi. So I would challenge people. No, we can do it in another way. So my dissertation was different. I challenged the professors, and the professors liked my dissertation, and I barely passed. It's not like they want to get rid of me. Like, bye. Right? But that opened new doors for me, because now I was different. Now I could say, it's okay to be different. It's okay to challenge the system. It's okay to dica, non funziona così, forse funziona qualcosa. And that's what I did on the United Nations. The United Nations, as Chantalina and other people explained, had very rigid systems. One of the most rigid systems is, are you familiar with Mother's Day and Women's Day, March 8th?
8 marzo.
March?
Molto festeggiato in Italia.
That's an international UN day, which is specifically for women. And I said, why is the United Nations not celebrating small piccole imprese? Why are they not celebrating small businesses? Italia, 99% of all small businesses in Italy are all small businesses. So I went to the United Nations and I asked, United Nations, what do you do to support small business? Who are you? Chi sei tu? Ma io sono un piccolo professore all'università, faccio ICSB, vai via. So the next thing I did is I complained a lot. You complain a lot. Bravi noi italiani. Ma non funziona! Right? I complained way a lot that I got the ear of the top people at the UN. And they said, okay, we agree with you. Small business is ignored. So what do you want to do? You want to continue complaining? I'm like, no. I want the same day as Women's Day, but for small business. And you know what they told me? By deal. Go away. Students, very simple item. You cannot have the day. Okay? Why can't I have the day? Right? Well, you can. But why? Well, because you can. But why again? Well, because you're not a country. Oh, I have to be a country? Yes. Ciao, Italia. Sono italiano. Ma tu chi sei? So I started calling ambassadors. Hey, I have an idea. Can you sponsor a day? And then I asked 20 countries. And then one country answered me. It was Argentina. Ciao, Argentina, mio nonno era di Argentina, abitava in Argentina, prendiamo un caffè. And then I basically asked Argentina to sponsor a day to create an international day called Small Business Day on June 27th. And now I am the founder with support of Pauline and many other people because they thought I was crazy. Right.
I like crazy.
And we now every year celebrate June 27th as Small Business Day in the United Nations.
But it's micro small business.
Micro, small
And say
business.
why?
Yeah.
Because that's the negotiation avenue.
Yeah, that's where, why micro? Because we were so close. We were so close. And then I get all the Caribbean islands, so no problem block the United Nations. And Madame Rose, she was ambassador to one of the islands. She calls me in my office, in her office at the UN. She goes, I'm the UN block of islands are going to refuse your day. 9 o'clock in the morning. She tells me this bad news. Theo, what do I do? The only thing that comes to my mind, I say to her, why don't you love me? And she goes, what, excuse me? I'm like, you don't love me. She's like, no, I love you. No, you don't love me. And she goes, no, because you forgot micro. I'm like, and why don't you have juice? Like, you want juice? I'm like, I'm thirsty. Like, let's you get your juice. And I drank juice. And she goes, can you add the word micro? Like, we could add the word micro. Now, think about it. Chi sono io negotiating with the head of the Caribbean islands at the UN to add the word micro? Because I was crazy. You just ask. And you got it approved.
What is micro? What's the size?
Micro.
One
You
person.
can-
One person. One person. Like
You
a
can be
family.
a micro business.
Family owned or one person.
And
selling
One person or
vegetables.
family owned.
Yeah.
Okay.
So every year, June 27th, the United Nations celebrate. And why June 27th? Why June? Because I got the day now. Right? You're like, bravo, which day do you want? Right? You got it.
It's not your birthday, right?
Just to mess with the UN. Just to mess with the UN. The UN was created June 26th. So I always want to remind them. The next day is Small Business Day. Mine is Small Business. Happy birthday. So that's one of my biggest accomplishments. My second biggest accomplishment is I found a very smart woman. Mary.
That's so important.
And she's over there. She's my wife over there. So I met her in school. So I'm like, I'm not the smart one. She's the smart one. I'm the trouble. So, and that's my second biggest accomplishment. And my third accomplishment, they're out there, my boys, twin boys. So these are the three things. So that's it. So be crazy. You don't have to be a good student. But cause trouble.
ICSB, come on, ICSB.
ICSB is an accomplishment. ICSB is the International Council for Small Business, which is the nonprofit that helped me create this. But guys, you are in an exciting future here, so
Yes.
keep having fun.
Okay, you want to go?
Yeah, always hard to go after this crowd. So I was trying to think of, okay, what did I do? What's exciting to share here? So a small list, but mostly maybe things that made me happy and that meant something to me. So in no particular order, maybe some of them don't sound that interesting to you, but to me they brought me happiness and excitement. So one of them is, so I was a nerd, I was I'm like Ayman, I was really good in school and I took things seriously and I studied late and hard and I enjoyed it. I genuinely, I mean it's sad, but I genuinely enjoyed studying. But I was a cool nerd, I liked to go out, I liked to party, I liked to travel. And again, coming from, middle class family, I couldn't afford, we traveled, but it was mostly within the country, mostly close by, things that we could afford. And I was 20, I finished university at 20 years old, going 21, and I wanted to travel around the world, but there was no money to do that. And my family was not the type that would let me backpack, around the world. So I looked around and I investigated, and again, the scholarship theme comes up quite often. There was a scholarship for that. There's a scholarship for everything, if you look for it. So I applied to this program with this American university at the time, who was looking for ambassadors from around the world, but you had to comply with certain things, and it was 6 months of preparation. I did that just as I was finishing school, and I traveled around the world. Not paying again $1. I did 20 countries. It was my first time literally going the whole loop. So that's something that I'm super excited about, and it's something that, again, if I have any advice for you, it would be to travel and keep your mind open and look at others and interact with people, ask questions, observe. You know, I would sit and have a coffee and just look at people, I don't know, in downtown Myanmar, you know, and you see how the mom talks to the kids and the dad, and it's just super exciting. And if you can do homestays, it's the best thing on the planet. A couple of days with the family, you get so much, and it's amazing relationships that you build for life. So that's one. The second thing, again, going to things that brought me pleasure. When I first started working with IFC, my background was mostly finance, but there were no opportunities for me to work there. So they put me on something that was a little bit linked to my background, which was governance. So this is more of a structuring companies, boards, internal control, because I worked in auditing before, so they liked that, and they gave me this discipline to grow. And we didn't have much on family governance, and we had most of our investments, most of our clients were big established family businesses around the world. And many of them would die in the second and third generation. You know, people fight, divorce, you know, brother hates his brother, doesn't like the dad, and then all of a sudden the family business disappears. So we said we need to learn. We can't just be giving money. We need to learn and give them the tools so they can improve the governance and the family relationships. So we said, okay, what to do? And I looked at the literature at the time. It was limited. It was mostly books, and most of them are 400 or 500 pages that nobody wanted to read. Most of these CEOs, family businesses, didn't have time or didn't have the interest. So I said, okay, let me spend 6 months on this. So it was more of like a sabbatical. So I went, read everything that I could find, talked to the who's who at the time. It was mostly dominated by the US university at Kellogg University. So, School of Business. So, and I looked at all that stuff. I distilled it into a short book, 50, 60 pages, short and sweet, with case studies, clients who worked with, and put it out. And I was like, nobody's gonna care about this thing, you know, 6 months of my life. But I gave it my best. It's short, it's to the point. Guess what? The book takes off. It's been translated into 20 languages. The most translated publication of the World Bank Group. I'm still shocked. But again, some of it is maybe luck. Maybe at that time the topic was exciting, people liked it. Maybe because I had this idea I didn't have a lot of time. Maybe a bit of laziness as well. I was like 60 pages, 50, 60 pages to the point. It was easy to translate, people loved it. You know, I had CEOs who would show up to conferences, they have the whole book marked up. I mean, I was like, and if I had a 400 or 500 pages, probably something more academic, people wouldn't probably have read it. But anyway, so that's number 2. Number 3, in addition to the work that I do, I've always had a very soft spot for refugees. It's an area that, you know, I just felt as someone growing up in the world we live in. We've seen the issues in Syria, across, you know, several countries in Sub-Saharan Asia and so on. So it's an area where I wanted to do more, but time is limited. You know, at the end of the day, you only have certain numbers of the day, and you know, we have twin boys that kept us awake many, many years. Finally, we're more or less sleeping now. But and a full-time career jobs, we both travel. We spend probably half of the month traveling around the world for our jobs. So I was like, what can I do? So besides donating, you know, we can always give money, but what else can I do? So I joined this organization in the US. It's called NERA. It's the second biggest after UNRWA from the UN that works with refugees. And I had a specific interest. Again, follow your heart and follow maybe the areas where you think you'll make a difference. So to me, it has always been me being from Morocco and having grown through the Palestinian issue and so many similar issues. It was more the Middle East. That's where I wanted to put most of my energy. It spoke to me. I knew, I grew up with it, I know the history, and I felt for these people, and I felt I needed to do something. So it was right there, Washington, D.C. They reached out through some common connections. Again, the word connections comes up. And I was like, okay, I can give some of my time. So I joined the board, I helped reestablish the strategy, we moved the operations now out of Lebanon. We have, you talked about Zachary yesterday. Yeah. We're now moving into Jordan, we're looking into Syria. And you feel it. It's a little bit different from my day-to-day job as a finance here. I feel that I get to push the needle, and I get to be on the board and to give direction and use some of my connections in other countries, bring funds, and really make a difference. So, wow.
So now, what do you do in support of sustainable entrepreneurship? Do you want to? Yeah, yes. If you want to now.
So just give me some background. So how many people know about the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, so most of you, oh, great. So I'm going to back up. This was in 2015, and as Chantalina had mentioned, and before, we've been very much engaged with this. But this is what happened, and this is actually, this was a project that I'm very proud of when I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers. But what makes this so instrumental was this completely changed my life in 2010. And most people would have said, wow, Tess, you have the most amazing life up to 2010. You're hanging out, everybody. I sat on a lot of boards in New York City, Carnegie Hall, the American Ballet Theater, all of Guggenheim. But what was interesting was that even though I did think I had restructuring companies, being at top in the private sector, I really wanted to have something like a North Star. So last night, one of the presentations, I think was Enrico, who talked about having a North Star, that these are all just guiding points. This project, which I had mentioned earlier, was with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. This organization was founded in 1992 or 1995 when one of the wealthiest people in Swiss businessman said, you know what, we really need to do more for the planet from the private sector. So he asked his 15 closest business colleagues, let's start something, and then we're gonna, see if we can get more companies to join. So this organization, and it's down here, and everyone can have access to these slides, so I'll give it to them. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development was, before 2012, it was the only organization that had all of the multinationals who were interested and committed to the environment, working on changing the behavior of their industries as well as the countries in which they operated. Now, this project was inspired because, as I mentioned, my background is in corporate restructuring work, was that in 2008, during the global financial crisis, I represented the accounting industry in the global capital markets restructuring. So what that means is, for those in science, because I have 3 undergraduate degrees, a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Psychology, and a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from the University of Michigan, and I have an MBA from Columbia Business School. But with that background, when I was the person to represent PwC, which is the largest of the big 4 firms, but then I was became the Sherpa to the global capital markets restructuring work, is that you have to understand how money moves around the world. So having been a restructuring expert, I was able to understand how each industry, how the money flows. And then when you go up to the higher level, when in 2008, if you don't know, the heart of the problem was actually in the United States. But what happened was there was a whole misunderstanding and incorrect assumptions that the insurance industry thought the regulators were understanding of all these new financial instruments. And then the financial industry in the United States, the Europeans thought they had it under control. So you had this big domino effect in 2008, which came from all of these incorrect assumptions. So what happened at the World Business Council, PwC at the time was chairing the World Business Council, we said, what if the same thing is about sustainability? What if industries, countries, and companies are making the wrong assumptions? Then we need to all kind of get together so that we understand how we're all connected. So in 2008, when this project was started, the global financial crisis was happening, but we launched this project, and
No. There's interference from. Yeah.
So this is really these words, 9 billion people living well within the limits of the planet. It took 2.5 years to agree on those words. And these were negotiated across 23 countries, 400 multinational companies, and 16 industry sectors. And so the World Bank was involved with this, so every industry had every single resource available to put to this. And what the goal was is, if we want a sustainable world, what does that look like? And so 2050 was chosen as an end date because everybody knew in 2008 that 40 years, a lot is going to change. And if it changes, we can give away all our data now, and it's not really going to affect the competitiveness. But what we learned in that is that in order to get to the sustainable world, we were going to have to make sure that the true value, so you heard Antonio last night talk about the externalities are not included in the market prices and therefore things don't go on. We would need to have the true value. We are right now going through how are we going to get the externalities into the prices that we pay for products and services today, because it's not there. We were talking about energy and power and buildings. So if you had a view of what it has to be a sustainable world in 2050, this becomes a guiding post for one, the corporates as well as the governments. And this work, which was amazing because you had every single top university involved. You had Stanford, Oxford, like all of the top people looking at what needs to happen. But it was the first time everybody actually understood what everybody else was doing. So in 2010, General Electric, and I think at the time it was either Jack Welch or Jeff Immelt who was the CEO. It was the first time that Pepsi-Cola lobbied on behalf of the energy sector that they told the US government, if you do not have, if the United States is not at least 30% renewables by 2030, in 2008, GE or Pepsi will not build a plant in the United States because we know from this work that it's going to be cheaper to operate a plant in a country that is in renewables. So this work actually became an investment idea map for all the corporates. So if anybody has research funded by the private sector, this work guided governments. I'm on the US, I used to sit on the US roundtable for greening the US government. I'm also on the US delegation to the G20. So if the G20 is the 20 largest economies of the world, and last year it was hosted, and the presidency was hosted by the Italians, and the meeting was in November. This year it's hosted and led by the Indonesians. But if you use this as kind of the big picture map, when I used to be paid, it was crazy. In 2010, when I was presenting to Chantilly in 2010, my time was so valuable. I said, I will only deliver this for 1 hour at a minimum price of $20,000 because I just don't have the time to keep presenting this. And people paid it. So all around the world, people would pay $20,000. Of course, I would donate it. And I'd say, but that's how valuable this chart was. When I presented this to the Harvard business class of 2011, as well as the Wharton business class, I have so many young mentees who, what I would say is pick 5 things on the must-haves by 2020. And if you pick 5 of those things, there's going to be money made because all of the 400 multinational companies are committed to this. So you just have to pick. So I ended up doing women's economic empowerment, clean energy, which is the space and intersection that I wanted to work in. And so then I had all of these clients right away because I knew this is what their focus is. So it was really interesting that if you think of, Elon Musk, he picked 7 of these things to work on, right? And if you think of where Richard Branson is working on, agriculture and the data around that. So this was this big picture, which is why Chantilly wanted to say, hey, the private sector, of which all the money that the UN needs, that's why they needed our collaboration, because the private sector employs, right? The private sector is more employment, but we had the capital to make things happen. So if all the companies that really thrived under COVID, in 2008, we predicted one of the 4 scenarios that Shell identified was a pandemic. So every company who accepted this and all of the details behind this, of which the report is posted, they were prepared for a pandemic and they were understood what decisions had to be made and they had the contingency plans should a pandemic happen. Now other companies said, this is just the tree huggers, the greenies, this is just, they're just worried for a doomsday. But those companies did not succeed. Their companies had fallen in favor and their market share. But this in 2010 before the SDGs is what was driving the leading companies of the world. And then the governments followed suit.
How would this map be useful to them? Can you?
So for instance, so we were talking about, I will talk about the hydrogen. So yesterday we heard about the research that Paula and Milo were doing in hydrogen. That was interesting, super interesting, because they were talking about carbon capture utilization. Well, today, 80%, if you look at the targets for how the global warming can happen before it's irreversible, we can get to 80% of that target with existing technologies. But the remaining 20% of the target has to come from carbon capture, CCS, and it has to come from new technology. So anyone who's doing research in that space, of which they introduced to me, I had not even heard of CCU as an investable, because I'm a big investor, and I see dozens of proposals every day and pitches in the sustainability space, and that had not crossed my desk yet. And so if you look at energy-powered buildings and mobility, of which was identified as the 3 biggest areas of the carbon of the carbon problem, of which Shanshan is actually working on as well in her work this summer, that is where the opportunities are. So you could pick yield gains. I think I met somebody here in agriculture. Hannes is working on yield gains, right? I think. And so you have all of these areas. If you align your work, or if you have any of these that are interested, all of these areas will grow to 2050. And what I tell people was in 2008, if you were a secretary at Google, or if you were the head of marketing in GM, who ended up being either more powerful or had more money by 2010? It was the secretary of Google, right? Because when you're in a growing industry, it doesn't matter if you fail. It doesn't matter if you're at the top. If you're in a growing industry, you just ride the wave and the opportunities will come up. If you go in an industry that is shrinking, then it means that the opportunities are far and in between. And then you will always be fighting to be number one, because only the leaders win. But when you're in a growing industry, there's much more room for any opportunities to be created, but also to fail. So this in 2015, if you look at this as 2010, then these problems get translated to problems. Now these 17 goals have 169 targets. And this is a bet that Chantaline and I had. In 2015, Chantaline said, one day the private sector will be mapping in SDGs. I'm like, oh, you are crazy. There is no way. But it's true. If you look at the top multinational companies, they now have in their sustainability reports, we are working on SDG 9, SDG 5, SDG, they can map it. So now you can map, oh, I'm really interested in education. So I'm going to find all the companies and the governments of which SDG 4 is a priority, and all of a sudden now you know where your funding sources are, where your opportunities are, and so it becomes a map for engagement, but as well as for opportunity. Now when you look at the SDGs, what's really important to see is how do they relate to one another. So you have the biosphere, so we heard, was doing biodiversity yesterday. Somebody presented on biodiversity, Enrico actually was talking about biodiversity. If we don't have a planet, we can't have a society. Without society, which is what the carnivore study that Stefano presented, if we don't have a society and a functioning, peoples, you're not going to have an economy. So these are all very, very dependent, but people have forgotten about the planet itself because everybody was so focused on society or business. So this is kind of how to scale it. The last thing that I wanted to look or make sure you all have the context with is, again, these are all big macro. When people say, oh, Tess, you always have the future, I go, my job was to make companies more money. So I have been trained my entire, the lab since I graduated college in 1988 to be at least 3 months before a CEO, because then that way they will pay me to give them advice. But we are right now in the second wave of technology development. And I think we are at a nanotech conference, right? So of course, it was funny when Paul and I met, I knew this, so I think we met in 2017. So this came out in 2016. It was started by when the Germans under Angela Merkel wanted to figure out what's the future of Germany, this guy, Henry von Schiele came up with this model of the fourth industrial revolution, of which then Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum then embraced and then asked Henry von Schiele, hey, we need to share this with the world. The fourth industrial revolution is the convergence of the physical, biological, and digital virtual worlds, which means is I can manipulate the physical on my computer. You could not have done that before 2009. You could not have manipulated biological systems or physical systems, but you can today. We are now entering meta, right, the metaverse, in which we can even manipulate more. But if you look at all of these technologies, you can actually see the way. So nanotechnology and how we're going to be using that to change the future of both the physical world and the biological world is part of Marlo's work, the Furrier's work. And so science, you have to remember, the disciplines across STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, is all about creating solutions. When you look at the degrees and the disciplines of finance and economics, it's all about the allocation of resources, but the solutions will be coming from those with a STEM background. But in order for the society, so if you look at these disciplines, right? So these are the scientists right here. I mean, there's also scientists in these areas, but if you look at society, this is the marketers, the communicators, the artists. They are the ones that you will be moved and more powerful with your heart. So that's how come every single discipline is extremely important, and it's this collaboration that is so critical to our future. But I think that's enough if anybody has questions as a foundation, as a stepping stone, but these are the future opportunities. And there's so much detail that goes behind all of this. I just wanted to give you, the big picture. You can source the World Economic Forum, the SDGs, and then this is the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And this is the one where it's one page, small words, but it is the one pager that if you wanted to see and you wanted to follow where all the money and the investments are going, is here by decade.
I would ask you to, since this would tie beautifully into the equality movement thing. Let's talk about Pakistan with that.
Let that
So actually, the equality movement is how the three of us met, because one of the things that Tess did mention is this thing here. Economic empowerment of women is actually a must-have. Right now, we're pretty much ignoring 50% of the capacity of the planet because we don't actually capture women's innovation because women innovate all the time, but it's in rural area, they meet the problem, they fix the problem they have. But because we only fund what is happening in Cambridge and Silicon Valley, those technologies don't get scaled up, and therefore they don't get to see the light of the day, right? And so economic empowerment of women is extremely important. And so one of the things that we decided, first of all, let me just backtrack and say the SDGs, one company particularly said is the best future business opportunity ever put in front of companies. Because these are, and what countries are doing, Italy, Canada, US hasn't done it, of course, US is always an exception. But every other country except for Yemen, except Yemen and US and Eritrea, perhaps, the countries are at war. Every single other country, 190 countries have already done a review of what they're doing and how they're going to and prioritize and how they're going to achieve the SDGs. All of our countries have done that. And that means that if you look at that maps of all those countries, as a business, you know where the money is going to flow, because these will be the priorities of all those countries in the next, well, now we have 8 years left. And one of them is economic empowerment of women. And so one of the things that we said is, and Paul Pullman, former CEO of Unilever, said, Google his talk on the business opportunity related to the SDGs, but he literally created a group, and they estimated that there's $12 trillion of business opportunities associated with achieving the SDGs. That's what Tess was talking about. And so the equality moonshot is, well, there's going to be all this money, right? How do we ensure that women capture part of this? So the equality moonshot is women capture 30% of the business opportunities that will be associated with the SDGs. And we hope it be 50%, but we want to be realistic and make sure that we actually achieve at least 30%. And if once we achieve the 30%, it's going to be kind of an exponential growth to get to the 50%.
Absolutely. So this is the message for
So that's the equality moonshot.
companies that ladies in this room might be starting. So think big.
Oh, and
Don't
one
be scared
example.
of thinking big.
Sorry about that. So people say, well, how do you do that? Well, up to now, what we try to do, the environmental part that we talked about, because Secretary General said we have a triple crisis. Everybody talks about climate change, but biodiversity loss and pollution, the three are interrelated. We need to address the three together. But that's not even enough, because we also need to stack. That's the E of ESG, right? Environment, social, governance. So the environment, you can't address it without addressing the social, the S. And how do you do that? Well, one way of doing what I've been talking about and Tess has been talking about is to say, okay, as you create business, say in renewable energy, how do we ensure women own the asset? So women own renewable energy companies. How do we ensure women own space development companies? And Tess can tell you more about that, because there's 50-50 now in science of women on the
Research side.
on the International Space
Center.
Center. But when you look at the business side, it's still dominated by men. And yet, what's the largest probably growth sector? Sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, space, and digital. So we need women in these sectors. So if you haven't chosen yet which sector you're going to go, ladies, please help me and choose one of those sectors. And we'll help you. Boys too, we need your support too.
So I think we spoke a lot. I think
Yes.
that they got incredible, rich message from all of you. I would open up now the conversation if there are questions. If not, we can go back and add some, to the things that we were thinking of offering to this audience. Who has questions? You heard a lot of stuff. Maybe you're a little bit overwhelmed by the avalanche of information and bird's eye perspective also on what you're doing. So who breaks the ice? Let me see. Who is in any of the? Yeah, go ahead.
So do you think that it is possible to reach the 2050 goals? I mean,
So, in 2018, there was a study by the Club of Rome, and that was developed more than 52 years old, and it's former heads of state, lots of Nobel laureates, many of the most wealthy philanthropists. They issued a report in 2018 that said, transformation is feasible.
Transformation
is feasible. So the study was saying we need to look at all the trade-offs. If we're going to achieve all the SDGs by 2030, they said, we see all these reports, they seem like they're all overlapping, but we really want to see map review and let's look at the trade-offs. To achieve all 17 SDGs by 2030 will take 3 planets. Therefore, the question was so. And so what happens is the prioritization, which is what Châtelet talked about, is it says there's only one path left to a sustainable 2050 remaining. One is the transition to renewables, 2, the doubling of sustainable food chains, productivity every year, and then changing the development models, which we can't do, that's really the government, because they want different countries to develop differently. 4 is quality education and health, and then gender equality. So the short answer is, when that report came out, so some of us saw the report before it came out in November 2018, but that was the report that inspired the UNSG to call the Extraordinary Climate Summit in 2019 in conjunction with General Assembly. Hey guys, we got to focus, and we got to focus on renewables, therefore we're going to do this climate summit. In parallel to that, there was another meeting, because I'm an investor, that was going on in Silicon Valley. Everybody in Silicon Valley doubled down on space, because it was like, shit, how are we going to, we need to figure out a plan B if we're not going to get there. And so the space economy, and then that's when you saw, even though everyone was dabbling in the space economy, you will see the investments into the space economy literally went straight up, as soon as people started getting this transformation is feasible report, which was generated. There was 33 universities collaborated, did this meta-analysis. All the top scientists all around the world who had been studying all aspects of this, were part of that and the peer review. But what was most interesting is the blessing of COVID. Everybody thought there are silver linings to every single terrible thing. And the silver lining was COVID was, one is nobody was said that the world could collaborate to fix anything. COVID proved we could collaborate. Second thing is, everyone said there's not enough money to fix big, hairy problems, wicked problems. COVID proved there was money that showed up. All of a sudden, everybody thought they didn't have money, but as a member of the G20, the finance ministers met 13 times in 2008 to 2009. We were within 48 hours of a global financial complete disaster. In April of 2020, nobody wanted to be even close to where we were in 2009, which is why they started printing money as soon as they saw something that could affect it. So when you say, can we do it? COVID proved we can do anything when the world puts its mind to it. Are we going to get there? So we have a lot of things that showed up this year, including the invasion of Ukraine, including now this the pandemic that is unrelenting. But space economy, what people don't realize, it's not about just tourism. Space economy is giving us the data because you're going to be using those satellites to actually monitor the planet. And that's where I think is the biggest opportunity. Italy is the only European country where you have every aspect of the space economy and the supply chain is in Italy. You can build a rocket and anything from scratch, anything to do is sending a rocket to space and launch it. There's no other country, not even the Germans, have that capacity. And I just learned that this past year. And so the United States can do it. We have so the Artemis program, NASA's program is to put the first woman and the first person of color on the moon by 2025. And so there's a lot of work that's happening to one. It's a booming industry. If you want to tie your work to the space economy on how you manage the planet, that is wide open. There's plenty of funding, and just because these are brand new opportunities. If I was the only one at Coopers and Lybrand in 1996 who was on the business side, who said, hey, we should look at the internet. Tess, that's a fad. This technology stuff, leave it to the IT folks. They're the back office. They just automate all of our processes. Don't focus on that. And but my good friend was so engaged with them. Oh my God, I want to learn about it. And I became this expert on the internet in 1997, and that's how I ended up being offered partners. This partner was because I had this knowledge, but it was because this very interesting friend just brought me into the internet, and he wanted to explain why it's going to change the world, and I didn't know why, but then all of a sudden it started happening. We are in 1994 of the space economy. We are within 5 years of it exploding beyond. So what I tell people all the time is, it's always good to see what's in front of you, and then you choose which ride you want to take. Do you want to take the fast ride, or do you want to take the slow ride, or do you want to take the ride with all, or do you want to wait and you just want to wait until it stops in front of you? So, the space economy, as it's going to address and cure all of this, people think that if you invest in the space economy, if you bring the space economy, you're forgetting the Earth. No, the space economy is so that you can look at the Earth from far away and monitor what's going on the Earth, right? So that's a thing. So yes, it is feasible that we can achieve 9 billion people living within the plans. Where are people betting right now? It is 50-50. If you asked me in November 2020, everybody said, we are going to get there, right? Because you saw the world united, you saw the money flowing in the right place, and then all of a sudden, then you have the first quarter of 2021, and we're like, wow, we still have this pandemic, we now have another war. Now it's back to 50-50, and who knows if certain elections turn the wrong way at the end of this year, then that's going to change it.
So the answer is maybe.
Okay. We've lost, just to complete, we've lost every gain we've made for developing countries has been lost with the COVID-19, and now with the crisis, and with the war in Ukraine, I invite you to read the report. My Secretary General has been asked by Secretary General Guterres to lead the Global Crisis Response Group in response to the war in Ukraine, and it's relating to the food, fuel, and finance crisis coming out of that. And so if we have 69 countries on the planet right now at high risk of the three crises, and 107 at high risk of at least one of them, Sri Lanka already defaulted on its debt. If we don't act now to provide liquidity to those countries, to feed their people, and to have electricity, and to not default on their debt, we will have so many failed states that we will have on a stable planet and not be able to do it. So it's extremely important we all put pressure on our government that happen, because we're going to lose 10 to 20 years of development on this planet.
So you guys remember the presentation about the carnivores yesterday, right? So the movement has changed because of climate, right? So you now have carnivores in places that weren't there. You had the jackal, you had the bear, and then you had what was going on in the desert. This movement of people, resources, and life is going to change and accelerate as the planet warms. But everything is being rebuilt. It is I wish I was 20 again, because this is awesome. You guys can rebuild everything. And there is such huge opportunity in finding what is aligned with what interests you and where the opportunities are. So as things get rebuilt, because anything is open. We are, if you look at the technologies, and I don't have the timeline for this, we are within probably 3 years of quantum computing. There is no country, no industry, no person who knows what life will be with quantum computing. Everything has been linear today. So when you're talking about linear growth, oh, this is the past, we can predict the future. In quantum computing, it's exponential growth. And so the first time we saw exponential business models was the Pokemon Go. You had a $0 to $3 billion company in 18 months, and then it collapsed. That was the first taste of what life could be. And so this is all opportunity. It sounds scary, but it's actually super exciting right now. I can't tell you enough. And I have a lot of mentees. All you have to do is pick a technology. You cannot be ignorant of the technologies. If you fail to understand any of these technologies, then you are choosing to wait for things to happen to you. You are waiting, and you're letting other people drive your car. But if you want to help direct where you're going, understand, pick any of it. It doesn't, and you don't have to be an expert, you just have to be aware. And I think you've had plenty of, machine learning, AI, I heard some presentations on that. And then you apply these technologies to fixing a problem. What problem do you want to work on? And you will have a career, a 50-year career, because these problems are not going to be solved overnight. It's going to take 50 years to transition the world to get to that.
Grazie. I think that one of her favorite phrases is never waste a crisis.
It's not my phrase, it's everybody's phrase.
It's everybody's phrase, but what do you use, in terms of opportunities ahead rather than seeing the problems and the challenges? Questions? Okay, let me give you the microphone so everyone can hear.
Yeah. Thank you very much, first of all, for sharing your experiences and also this presentation. I'm taking this chance to ask maybe for advice, but I hope it will be also useful for other people here. I'm working in CCU, a very specialized technical sector, and I was wondering if you have any advice for young people working in very specialized technical sectors that are also very interested in this roadmap for the future, because there is also a decision to make whether you want to work in a very technical area, maybe research and development, or in something a bit more open and try to impact and to try to help reach these goals in some other manner. Also, I mean more managerial things, like opening up other aspects. And this is open to everyone. If you have any thoughts, I would like to hear. Thank you.
So CCU is carbon capture and utilization.
Yeah.
No, very excellent question. And how many people are on your WhatsApp, on that group of yours?
Sorry?
How many people are in CCU in your WhatsApp group?
In my WhatsApp group.
Yeah, working on the same thing like you.
In my WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
I am among 2 people, I think.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's exactly the problem. Why only 2 people? You have the world in your phone,
Yeah.
right? And you can find it very fast. So why are you not spending time? See, I think you should divide your day into 3 parts. One part is technical expertise. 1/3 of your day is to be really good at what you do. 1/3 is expanding your network, which is the WhatsApp group should have at least 100 people in it from around the world, because it's very easy to connect. So 1/3 become more technical, 1/3 your network, and 1/3 what I call is the human element, which is the coffee, conversations, relationship building, and all that stuff. So if I look at my day, I divide my day into 3 parts. I do this really good. I keep expanding my network because you never know. I just met her yesterday. Now ideas are floating in my head. We can talk about this, we can talk about this. And 1/3 is the human element, which is part of humanity. So I think for you, but everybody else, if you wake up in the morning, if you just say, I'm going to be really good at one thing, you're missing out on 2/3 of your other day, which is
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I mean, just to build on that one, in one comment only, totally agree, is we're in crisis. So just doing research for doing research we're past that. We need to bridge the science policy. So how can you reach, it's not only people that work on the technology, but who are the influencers, decision makers, that they need to know what you know, so they can make better policy.
So I'll give you, it was a huge aha moment, and I'm deep in all of this. I went to the first demonstrator project with Paula Heimworks for CCS, carbon capture sequestration, because it was the first that went live in Reykjavik, Iceland in September 2021, and we were there in May. Within 6 months, I'm like, I need to see this. I need to see it works, because then I had seen that pitch deck, and then there were other technologies around the world that was kind of based on what was going on there. I had never heard of CCU until yesterday. And all of a sudden, I'm texting as you guys are presenting, shit, who has like, so I was sending it to all of my networks, like, you guys gotta figure out, the Dutch are doing this. And it was really interesting, because now I learned that one is the Italians are concerned because the steel industry is here in this area. So that's the thing, is like, this is why these kind of random, we're here together thanks to Paula and thanks to Marina and Paula who are putting all of us together to learn about something like, wow, you never know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And to hear all of you working on something that now is the new technology, right? 80% of our targets can be achieved with existing technology. We have to still find the other 20%, and CCU is one of them. So you need to let people know what you're doing, because they don't. And we're deep in it. We're deep in solutions.
So maybe just to add, because this has been brilliant. So to add to these elements, look, I mean, whatever space you and I don't know a lot about your specific field, but whatever field you're in, it could be science, typical finance, management, medicine, whatever. The 50-60% of the effort has to go into doing good work. There's no playing around it. I mean, somebody's good work could be 10 hours, other person's good work could be an hour, and they get to the same result. But at the end of the day, really your work will speak for you. So no matter what field you're in, I mean, that has to be front and center. The second element is exactly what Ayman was saying, which is something that many of us, particularly, again, those that are focused and so on, we don't give it a lot of time because we're passionate. We want to do really well in a specific field. We overlook the network, the opportunities, talking to someone about that scholarship that you might have never heard of, about that opportunity, about an event like this, listening to people and so on, a conference, a program on YouTube, something that you can learn something from, a connection. Something that will open a door for you that will probably take you 2 years if you do it on your own, as opposed to something low-hanging right there. So clearly, networks, huge. The third element that I would add is really build in some time, maybe in your day when you have time, if not at least in your week or at a minimum in your month, where you sit for half a day and look at where you're going. What is my plan for the next 3 to 5 years? the world as we knew it, maybe like more our generation, even before, where you go to school, you get a university degree, and you get a job for the rest of your life, and you have your kids, and that's it, is long gone. That word does not exist anymore. We're constantly educating ourselves. We're constantly picking new concepts, new degrees, learning new ideas. The way I was doing work, when I started working 20 years ago, is completely different from the way we do work today. It's just incredible. And for you guys, it's going to be even more so because things are going exponentially then fast. Something that was in fashion 2 or 3 years ago might not be anymore. So being and constantly thinking, where do I want to go? How can I leverage my connections, my networks, these new concepts? How can I integrate those? Maybe not fully, I'm not the expert, I can't be an expert in everything. But sitting and having that conversation, feeding off the networks, and planning is extremely important. And many of us, unfortunately, don't do that. We get stuck because we're good, because we want to work hard and we want to do our best, but we really don't spend a lot of time on networking and on that long-term vision and that planning, and we pay the price for that.
So I have a good tool. Make 3 lists. Your first list is the 10 things you would be doing on a Saturday at 10 a.m. And that will be, my husband would be golfing, I would be out meeting new people. He'd be with his 4 best friends, I would be out at a conference, right? So, and is what's remarkable is that list is actually turns out to be your passions because that list will not change that much. Your second list of 10 is going to be what do you want to achieve objectively within the next, it used to be 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, now it's literally 2 to 4 years because things are changing so fast that, and you have to make it very concrete. I want to publish 2 papers, I want to visit 2 countries, I want to eat at 3 Michelin-starred restaurants. Because that's the list that you're just going to continue to check off and add on. The third list is actually create an imaginary board of advisors. When I was offered a nice investment banking job that I could have made a lot of money back in my late 20s after my 3rd child was born, but it only hit one of the 20 things, the 10 things on my first list, the 10 things on my second list. And so when I went to my advisory board of 10, and they could be people dead or alive, it could be, I had Madonna, she would reinvent herself without giving a shit about anybody else. I like Steve Jobs because he also did stuff that he didn't he created new products and designs. But when you ask them, this imaginary board of advisors, if I take this job in investment banking, then Oprah, who was one of my imaginary boards, says, well, what are you overcoming? What's the big challenge you're doing with this new position? Nothing. Madonna would ask me, are you reinventing yourself? No, I'm just making more money. So then all of a sudden that job offer that looked so good on paper was actually a shitty thing because it wasn't what my heart was into and it wasn't what I wanted to achieve. So when you use that as kind of a basis, I do that for even in assessing whether I should come here. I've been invited to NanoValbruna since its inception, but I just didn't have the time. But now, there's a reason. I want to go see Julie Granzini's lab on photovoltaic cells because now I know that the investments on the renewable sector is quadrupling as we speak every day. And therefore, do I invest in her technologies or how do I get access to that technology? And I want to see her lab. So I said, okay, I love Paula, I love this conference, I'll meet new people, that's one reason. 2 is the lab, and 3, who doesn't want to go to Italy, right? So it's kind of like, and I haven't been in 3 years, so I had 3 things on what do I want to achieve, what would I be doing on a Saturday morning, and all of a sudden I could justify, and that's, to me, I've used this tool that I was thankful that I had been given back when I was 14 years old, and people would look at my career path and say, oh my God, it is so all over the place, but to me, it's doing everything I love to do, and it's doing all the things I want to achieve. So it's a really, it's building, is absolutely right. Like the network is why you're going to expand your knowledge. I know shit about any of this stuff, but I do know these pictures. So then I can look at, this person, the economic that's her expertise. Then I know I can call Panos. I don't know if Panos is here, but agriculture is this, because now I'm finding the experts, the PhDs, who know these topics. I can't wait to start pinging Paolo and Nana about hydrogen, because all of a sudden, I was in a meeting in California 3 years ago when, with all of the senior automotive executives, and they were talking about the future of hydrogen. I'm like, wait, all of a sudden, these are the experts. I don't think they know that. I'm going to try to look up those presentations. But, this is how it happens. So find the experts. You don't have to know any of it. I just know big pictures. I like to know big things because then I can kind of map things around because, I've worked in 90 countries. I have 1 million miles on 3 airlines. And so I can kind of put these things together. But there is an expert on nanotech. Mauro Ferrari is an expert in nanotech. And that's the future. That's the third wave. That's 2025. So, we don't need to be smart in any of it. Just pick what you like about these things. I like pictures. I like big topics. I like things that I don't know. I'm not as good at asking why, but I'm really good at finding and connecting people because do you guys remember that memory game with cards? That's I really was good at that. So I'm good at chess. So those things I know about myself. So you really have to be truthful. When people say, the 10 things I was doing on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. is exercise. Chatelaine may go off. Actually, there's no way I'm going to be exercising at 10 on a Saturday morning, but she'll be on a run. But being truthful to yourself, and you'll realize how easy it is to navigate all the questions, even the research. Because at the end of the day, you have to work with people you like. Because if you don't, it's a very hard life if you're not with people.
So I'm a professor at GW, George Washington University. I teach entrepreneurship, innovation, and creativity. My biggest assignment that I give all my students is that every class they have to tell me something I've never heard before. Something new, never heard before. Something that I've never seen, heard, or even understood what it is. And 4 years ago, or almost 5 years ago, I had a student come in and she says, blockchain. I'm like, what? I'm supposed to be the professor. Right? I'm like, what is blockchain? And she spent 10 minutes explaining to me what this is. And I'm thinking, she's crazy. Right? Next week, another group comes in, talks about cryptocurrency. I'm like, what is that? They're like, it's part of blockchain. I'm like, oh, you know blockchain. Right? And then they're like, explain that to me. The moral of the story is, it might sound strange, blockchain, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, all this stuff, but it's not me or Chantaline, that it's you. Right? Last night I watched you all here. I saw some of you were playing computing games outside. Right? We're playing video games outside. We had these video games going on. I was so curious. We're in the middle of the mountain, and you all were doing computing on video games. So I'm thinking in my head, is this a game? Or are they developing something? Or are they stealing money from someone? Which is okay. It's entrepreneurship in a way. But just think about our generation. We're vintage. We know the theory. We don't know the creativity. Creativity is you. So as you saw this, and saw the fourth generation or that, I tell my students, it's not how much you know. It is about the mindset of how you want to continue. Because at some point you will know something that somebody wants from you. And then they say to you, how much? And you say, tanto. Because I know this. So when I go in and ask for this, I don't go for what's existing. I go find the people that are on that cutting edge. I noticed you when you walked in. You were tall, scruffy hair. I'm like, something's up with it. And of course I was right. I had that notion. But I'm also surprised. You all saw the program. Nobody reached out to me or anybody on LinkedIn. Perfect. We were here. We were coming. You have a captive audience. But nobody messaged us saying, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I want to talk to you about this idea. I want to explain something. You're afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Un poquito friulani. We're a little free, right? We say
The
no.
worst that can happen is I say no, which means, okay, 5 minutos y pongo.
No, but persistence, right? When people say no, you keep pushing.
It's okay. It's the only way you can advantage is this. So I just want to give you some ideas for thought.
Yeah, I think that one of the beauties of this panel is that you get information that's actionable for you as a company, but also actionable for you as as people personally. This idea of the imaginary board, I love it. The first time I heard it from her, I created my imaginary board of counselors that I ask questions to when I'm about to make decisions. So I hope you took at least mental notes of a lot of suggestions that came out of this incredible panel. Yes, we have more questions. Go ahead. Just pull it up, push it out.
Well, during these days, many guests during the workshops underline the role and the importance of teamwork during so many situations. So my question here is, how is it possible to collaborate, especially during the fixing of sustainable development goals? Because nowadays, to me, it is really visible that we need an interdisciplinary approach so that to face so many crises and also political, economical, and also cultural affairs. So that's my question. How is collaboration possible in teamwork?
Who wants to?
Yes.
Okay,
When you start.
Let me go first, and then I'm sure you hear much more exciting stuff from Chantal. So look, teamwork is at the heart of everything. I'll go to sustainability in a couple minutes, but anything you do, and our kids are outside, and they're twins, but they're very different personalities. So one is outgoing, social, fun, and playful, and he'll get whatever he wants. He's very socially acute. He'll look at you and he'll know how to get you, and it takes him less effort. The other one is more, like by the book, everything by the rules, and studies hard, reads his books, and doesn't make the extra effort. He's very sweet too, but very different from his brothers. And he always complains to me that, oh, I have to do this schoolwork, and I have to work with the other kids, and they don't want to do the work. And at the end of the day, I end up doing it because I want to make sure we get an A. And I'm like, that's not how you do it. Make them do the work. And the other one does very little. Comes last minute, bang, 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 and they both get an A. But when I look at them, the first one has been stressing for 3 weeks. He's been carrying his team and doing all the work because he doesn't know how to crack the science of pushing people to do their work. The other one did the homework literally the night before. And he got an A. I mean, it's whatever, lazy, last minute. I stress out more than he does. But he gets more from his team. And I'm surprised. And I'm like, the first one worked harder than the second one. And he's potentially even smarter than his brother. He reads more and so on. But the other one leverages everybody because he's more socially tuned to what's happening. So that art of working with a team, and I'm giving you the example of 11-year-olds, they're in 6th grade, right? And this goes through university, goes through your work. I manage a team of about 20 people that are from all over the world, right? So we have Africa, Latin America, Europe, the US, and the cultures are very different. And I have to be constantly in touch and in tune with, with what they like, what they don't like, what I'm saying, what they're saying, how the mood is. And it's just something that you're gonna do all of your life, family, friends, and so on. So that's in terms of teamwork. So no other way around it, you have to learn it, and it's more by doing it that you get the way of doing it. Sustainability, absolutely. I mean, it takes everybody. It's not something that the UN alone can fix with their SDGs, which are a fantastic framework. I mean, it's excellent, and it really kind of maps the way of how to do things. But it's much bigger than just the UN. It's the private sector, the development organizations like IFC, World Bank, and the likes. It's the academia, it's the public sector, the policy makers in the country, writing the laws and the frameworks, and where are we going with things. It's the end consumers, it's you guys, it's us. The choices we make in recycling, extending the life usage of a product, the choices we make in what we eat, how we travel, how we live our lives, that's part of the equation. The financiers, the bankers, which kind of projects are you going to finance? I mean, right now we have our board that, in the bank, for instance, that looks at renewables. So we can't do anything in fossil fuels. It's been ages that we stopped doing that. But even within renewables, which technologies, how much, which countries, liquefied gas, is that still okay or no? Depends on the country. The type of infrastructure projects you do, the financing you do for women, for SMEs and the likes. So it really takes everybody, and it has to be teamwork. You can have the best private sector in a country if you don't have a government that's writing the good policies and pushing for the right policies. very little will happen. You can survive, but very little will happen. And you can have the best public policy, the best government, with the brightest minds. Without a thriving private sector, nothing will happen. And if you don't have that, the academia, the UN, the development organizations, the banks and the banks, to kind of be the instigator and the one that comes up with the ideas and pushes and helps with writing the right regulation, with financing the right projects, again, things will move very slowly. So it's really a bit of a teamwork.
Very good at setting the ground. So let me go to answer your question in three area. One is SDG 17, partnerships, right? So what does that mean? So that's one. Second is to look at the trade-off and synergies amongst all of these. And third is what Sana was just mentioning about, is that the complementary expertise that you need. And let's put all this together. So on 17, right? 17 is not just partnership, it's the means of implementation, it's trade, it's financing, and it's technology. So you know about CCU, but you may not know of the other pieces that goes with that, right? None of us has all of the knowledge that is needed because of the trade-off and synergies amongst all of them. So specific example, I'm working on increasing productivity in agriculture. I'm putting more fertilizer and I'm putting more pesticide to increase my production. What does that happen? I may pollute water, right? So now all of a sudden, I'm reducing the SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation. I may get people sick, so I'm getting the problem with SDG 3, right? Because of pesticide and fertilizers. There are synergies and trade-offs amongst all of them, and the problem with achieving the SDGs, it goes back to saying, is our ego. We think we know everything. If these problems were that simple, we would have solved them by now. We need each other. And it says in the 2030 agenda, it says that none of us can achieve this alone. And it goes back to what Sana was saying about you need academia, you need the policymakers, you need the technology folks, you need the business, and we all need to be in the same room to be able to put the pieces together. He agrees with me. To put the pieces together, and then the right sequence and combination. And then finally, why am I so hammered on the new economics for sustainable development? The economic system that we have has two major flaws, or a blind spot. Externalities that Tess talked about. So the fact that if I increase productivity in agriculture, I create other problems. That's externalities. And short-termism. The fact that we focus so much on the short term and we forget about the long-term impact. That's a lot of the financial sector. And to address these issues, we can only do it multidisciplinary, cross-sectoral, and by bringing all of the brightest pieces of us together and look at the positive, but be cognizant of the negative impact of all of our technologies. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Now, I realize now that we were supposed to end an hour ago. However, we have breakout sessions after this. There will be sitting in different corners outside, and you are more than welcome to approach them with your questions. We might take another one before we. Yes, absolutely, Lorenzo, you go.
I can speak out. That's not a problem. So first, thanks a lot for having shared your trajectory, because I think that it's fair to say that nobody succeeds, but only looking to those that did it is possible to find the right inspiration. So thanks for that. And I have a couple of questions on this. One is for you, because you are used to ask questions, so I have a question. You win the race of having a day celebrating small business. Why? I mean, which is the benefit of that?
Oh, it's actually.
If you can share with us the benefit and what would you like to do next after having achieved this goal?
Yeah, so the day was just the start.
Okay.
Because the day was a meeting place. Era la piazza.
Okay.
Dove tutti vengono. So now I created a day at the UN. That means the UN can call on people. I can call on agencies like UNCTAD, like the private sector, the ministers, the ambassadors, and say, come to the UN because we have a day and tell me, what are you doing to support micro, small, and enterprises in your country.
Okay.
On record, televised, if you Google it, June 27, we had a full day of basically 10 hours of ministers flying from around the world telling us what are they doing in Germany, in Africa, to support small businesses, on record.
Okay.
That means I'm putting the pressure on them to not just stop because it's on record. So because next year I come back and said, "Atu ay dito proceed." So what now? So we had a session, a very big session at the UN on women on development. Women on development. A lot of women initiatives happening around the world. I asked Chantaline, I said we should bring major women leaders to talk about what are they going to do to help support SMEs and women on development. The session was so packed that now we're going to expand it. The day is only the start. Now we capture the report that comes up every year. And if you ask me what I'm planning next,
Yeah.
because I got a promise, right, is I'm going to ask the heads of states, not ministers, but presidents, to come to the UN maybe next year or the following year, but to talk about what are they doing to support small business. And I got it from the, which is the largest agency in the UN. They said, "Babene, Ayman, Babene, okay, you can invite the presidents and we'll support you with it." The idea eventually is, why just big business? Why just big business? If we know statistically 98 to 99% of all economies are small businesses, why are we spending so much time and policy and resources supporting big business, which count only 40% of employment, if small business accounts for 60% of the GDP and employment?
Okay, so this is really good because we're going to start a debate right here. We don't witness it all. So I'm on the U.S. delegation to the G20. MSMEs is critical, very important, and it's actually on the G20, so you can probably get those heads of state. The one thing that's really, but the reason why you work through the multinational companies is they control 70% of capital financial flows. And that is because through their supply chain, are the MSMEs, right? They sell their products and services to meet the needs so that the large, were the efficiencies of trading and globalization. If we didn't have globalization, you're absolutely right, but with globalization, that's where you can scale as fast as you can. Now the importance of, so one of the things on the policy side is that there is significant research that shows that small businesses with at least 20 people are the ones that can create jobs within 3 years to 500. Why is that important to governments? Because then you can collect taxes from not just the companies, but those individuals who will have those incomes. So what's really interesting is this pushback and our understanding of how I've always used the large multinational companies as my lever around the world, because my projects I do, if I can't do it in 3 countries in 6 months, it's too small, because I'm in a hurry to get something done against the timeline. Now, but the world operates with the MSMEs because they are 60% of employment. They are the heart and souls of our societies. So how do you translate all that? Which is what all of the NGOs are responsible for doing, because they're the ones who are going to be pushing the large corporates and the governments to make sure that we just don't become a machine, which is what the large corporates are. They are big machines to make things efficient.
170 days. 170 days, in the end, small business Italian firm gets paid by a big business.
Yeah.
So you're a small business, you have to wait for a check from a big business in Italy for 170 days.
I know.
I
I know very well.
170 days.
I know very well. But one of the issues that normally the small business has is much weaker in good lobbies.
Exactly. So now we say
they are too small for that, and this is why the big
in
ones
the
are not in the
US,
race.
the US now, it's 30 days.
Even if they waste money.
Yeah.
In 30 days,
To get best practices.
30 days in the US, if you're a big business that employs a small business,
Yeah.
you get your check within 30 days
You have to get
or less.
Yes.
So, Lovedi, our conversation. So I'm the bad guy. Right? But for small business, I'm the bad guy.
But I have a second question, if I may, and then we stop it. Because based on your experience and trying to translate on our trajectory. One of the main things we have to deal, and especially the youngest person, my child, or my friends here, is to develop the capacity to overcome obstacles in the journey. You know what? Obstacles and frustration. Because, you finished your PhD, you made a very good result, now you have to enter in some way in the real world of working and finding becoming an entrepreneur or something like that. And it's difficult, okay? And so sometimes, even if the objective is the good one for you, you don't find a way to overcome obstacles. Any idea, any suggestion for that, based on your experience? Because the capacity to overcome obstacles is one of the main engines. It's just motivation, it is whatever.
But let me ask you, what kind of, is it financial? Is it talent? Is it market? But specifically, because there's always...
Well, here,
money is not a problem.
Money is a problem every time.
Money is not a problem.
It's not a problem, but it's
too
a
much
problem.
money is around.
Yes, but if you don't have the experience, the capacity, the
Sure,
connection,
but there's networks, angel
Yes.
investors. So money is not a problem. I never thought money was a problem because there's too much money around the world floating like crazy. But the problem I see now is talent. That kid right there is secret. You don't know him. He's not out there, but he's talent. So the biggest problem with SMEs is finding talent. And the problem with the young people here is they don't want to reach out to say that they're talented. The biggest problem moving forward in Italy is talent. Not money, not markets, it's talent. And I think it's the challenge of the young people now to put themselves on the map and saying, sono qui, sono pronto, dove lavoro?
And if I can bring this question into the last kind of a clip that we can get from each one of them, from the vintage point in life where you are now, what would you tell the 20 years old self? If you can have just, something that, maybe this, I should not be shy when it comes to my talents. Whatever I know, I'm the only one that can do it. Yes, that is what I would tell my 20 years old self. Go out and be confident.
I would say, I'll start with the woman, the young woman here. Don't be shy. If you're quiet, nobody will notice you. You're good. We all know you're good. Statistics, data shows you're good. Use your network. You know what I mean? Reach out. You know what I mean? It's not as bad as you think it is, because you're really good. In the US, most entrepreneur women are more profitable than men because they do their homework. Right? And especially for Italian young women here, you're really good. You just need to take that first step. Right? And if it doesn't work, blame someone else. Blame someone. Sorry, kid. So, I'll take the blame. Right?
What would you tell your 20-year-old self from what you know now?
It's okay not to know.
It's okay not to know.
Failure is okay. Failure is not making it. Failure is learning. And 3, just a word of wisdom: do not believe anybody that tells you you're millennial, you're worthless, you don't know what you want, you're too demanding. It's people not being able to manage you. Or lazy. And you are the best untapped resource that the world has. And every generation we're told the same. We were told the same when we were maybe less than you guys, but you guys you're dreaming, you're too optimistic. What's the alternative to being optimistic? People ask me, you in the UN, there's so much problem in the world, how can you be optimistic? What else am I supposed to do? Just give up, roll up in the ball and die? No, we all, the positive energy and believing is so powerful. So believe in yourself, as Ayman said, and be optimistic, because there's no other option. And then crowd out with people like you because the negative energy is so much more powerful than positive energy. Surround yourself with positive energy people and ditch the other one. You don't have to tell them, just don't talk to them, don't reach out to them.
Okay, so, as building on theirs, so I want to add new ones just so that way you'll have a different thought, is, has anyone heard of the Brazilian martial art, jiu-jitsu? Jiu-jitsu. So it's taking bad things or taking any action towards you and switching it. So I am brown, I am female, and I also was a mother of 3 kids. That is everything you would think would take you down in corporate America, but I was on top. And I took every single thing that was thrown at me growing up. So I have a very, very thick skin, right? Because when everything is against you growing up, but then you learn how to maneuver and to find the good things and the silver lining. So that is something that everybody should learn to do. It's like when somebody says something's bad or when something bad happens to you, you have to find why and what can you earn and gain from that experience, because there is a learning from every single experience. And so that is one thing. The second thing is I was so competitive, and it was a different world when we were growing up. I didn't collaborate. It was I wanted to win all the time. I wanted to be one all the time, and I didn't collaborate. Going back now, even though I've achieved amazing, results and a lot of success and things, I could be 1,000 times ahead if I had collaborated with everybody who was at my peer group at that time, right? So now, all I do is I surround myself with people who do things, who are smarter than me. I don't know if you've ever heard of this phrase, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself. And so it's not that you're giving up your good friends, your old friends, it's just you have to constantly push yourself to learn new things and to see things differently. Because if you don't constantly do that, then you will end up stuck, and then you will end up the average. You will end up feeling what everybody else does. But I'm always finding people who are at the very front end. I mean, so the example when Paula said Richard Branson and the space economy. So we were in Switzerland, and I said to him, the day you have a $25,000 trip to space, I'll go. And he goes, oh my God, we've been trying to find a price point at which the price will be, accepted. He goes, how did you come up with $25,000? I go, when my dad died in 2001, it cost my family $32,000 for his funeral and to bury him. I go, if I can come in at less than $32,000, that if I go to space and I don't come back, my family will say they got a discount. And so what is the crazy part is they're using that price point. SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, everybody is using, like Tesla's come up with that number.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So everybody in the space economy is now coming, oh my God, Tess, you were the only one who come up with a price point that everyone could associate with. The cost of a funeral. The cost of a funeral. So that's
Sana, what would you say to your...
So I would say one thing, which is, and back to your point earlier about issues and obstacles and hurdles, I would say, look, at the end of the day, things work themselves out. If you are hardworking, if you're a good person and you mean well, you'll get beat up. This is life. We know that. I grew up in a pretty well conservative environment with a lot of assistance from my family, very well protected, and I did well. I did my part. I was supposed to study and get good grades and scholarships and get a good job, and I did my part really well. And I thought, I'm not bothering anybody. I'm doing my best. Life should keep throwing at me good things, and I did get a lot of good things in my life. But then from time to time, you get a curveball. You get something that you didn't do really anything. You went into a team meeting and you did your best, and then people go behind you and you see things and you're like, where did this come from? It's not needed. And you apply for things and you're the best for them and you don't get them. Just an example, for instance, be it a loan, a position, a relationship, a lot of things that you do your best, and you're perhaps the best person for those things and you don't get them anymore. That's life, that's how things are. And that's an obstacle, and this is assuming you're doing your best. You know what, you just take your time, you grieve, you cry, you do what you want to do, what you have to do, and you'll do this across your life, no matter how old you are. You do it when you're 14, when you're 15, perhaps when you're 18. And you get up again, you take the time that you need, and you do your best, and you look for the next opportunity. And you give it your best. And it might not work in the second, but it will work in the third, or it will work in the fourth. And it will work in the second many, many times. But keeping this positive mindset that just do your best, be a good person, surround yourself with the networks and connections, keep learning, keep an open mind, things will happen. I've tried it many times. So.
Thank you. This was a fantastic panel. I don't know if you can all agree with me. Noah left this room after 2 and 15 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. I think we learned so much, even people that have been around these superstars for that long. So thank you all for making it from